Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Game Day. Well, solo game day. We're Heavy Cardboard. We teach, play, and discuss medium and heavy strategy board games, war games, 18xx. I am your host, Edward Euler. Happy to be joined by, well, I guess you guys, as it were, because it's just us today. Today we're going through and playing through Freedom, the Underground Railroad, designed by Brian Mayer and published by Academy Games. So welcome, everybody joining us live around the world. And by us, I mean me, joining me live around the world, as well as after the fact. Before we get started, a big thank you to all the patrons who help make all of this possible. Without all of y'all, this ain't happening. So if you guys are enjoying the content that I'm putting out, especially during the quarantine that's unfortunately going on, then you can thank the patrons as well. Speaking of which, if you would like to support the show and join said patrons, you can go to pledgehc.com, support the show there. If you think what I do, what we do here on the show is worth $1 or $2 a month, I certainly would appreciate it. In the meantime, if you like this video, give it a thumb down below. It really does help the channel. It certainly is appreciated. And something that helps both of us is subscribing, hitting the bell icon so that you get notified whenever we go live, like this here. So there we go. Freedom, the Underground Railroad. First off, how amazing is this hobby that we can have a board game that tackles this subject, right? About the history of slavery and about the abolitionist cause during the 19th century, during what is arguably the darkest period in the history of this country, which is during the fact that slavery exists, which is obviously abhorrent. So, so we are on the right side of history in this game. It is a co-op. Normally, it's 1 to 4 players. It's just me, kind of with you guys. So we're going to try and free slaves up to Canada and be on the right side of history on this. So there we go. All right. So this has been one of the only co-ops that I actually enjoyed playing, for the simple fact that I think the subject matter and the way it addresses the subject matter does a really good job of that. And so this was one of my favorite co-ops for a while. It's been a while since I played it. Refreshed myself on the rules, but yeah, it's not a hard game complexity-wise. It's just a hard game to win. Now, never played it solo, so we're going to be doing this together for the first time. So hopefully, hopefully we can succeed. There are technically 2 different ways that, well, I guess 4 different ways, kind of, that you could play this solo. You could play it as a single player, playing 1, 2, 3, or 4 characters, or of the various folks from within the Underground Railroad. I've chosen to do it with just 1, because that just feels like the right way to stream this. But you could play as 2 players, you could play as 3 players, you could play as 4. And I'm not sure if Rado did a 2-player version of this or not. I think he may have. So there we go. All right. So without further ado, let's get into Freedom, the Underground Railroad. Now, there is some history stuff that I'm going to read that touches on each period that is depicted in this game, because let's face it, I talk a lot because I talk for a living, so I kind of want to read it, and I think it adds to the theme and it adds to the impact of what it is that we're doing in this game. So I'm going to read that as part of the game. All right. Hey, Bill, I appreciate the support, man. Thank you very much. Definitely staying safe. Everything's going relatively okay here. So yeah, let's get into freedom, the Underground Railroad. Now, I'm going to obviously bring the camera down and the chat down during the teach. Teach really isn't that hard though. So before we go into the teach, I'm going to go over a little bit of background before we start each of the 4 phases. So before I talk about anything, I'm going to talk about something that's written in the back of the rule book. It says the states movement. A moment. The United States' troubled past with slavery dates from before the 13 colonies joined as a nation and continues to echo as racial tensions today. Human bondage has impacted nearly every civilization, and each of them has justified, outlawed, and dealt with the issue in their own way. For the United States, the formal end to slavery began on January 1, 1863, when President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation declared all slaves within the Confederate States free, though the president could not force the southern states to abide by the proclamation while the American Civil War raged. Though slavery would continue in the United States until the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865, the Emancipation Proclamation signaled to many that the tradition of slavery in the United States was coming to an end. Such a great change was not achieved by politicians and lawmakers alone. The hard work of the abolitionists, citizens who risked their safety and freedom to bring an end to slavery, served as the foundation for this move towards freedom. So as you can see on the bottom of the screen, I am representing one of the abolitionists within the Underground Railroad to try and free the slaves from the abhorrent practice that is slavery in the South that went on in the United States. All right, so what is it you guys are looking at? Well, we'll start over on the left-hand side of the board over here. So the North Star, the newspaper here, represents some of the tokens as well as the cards into 3 periods that take place in the game. So the game is broken up into 3 periods. There's the first period, which is 1800 to 1839, 1840 to 1859, and then 1860 to 1865. At the top, there are a predetermined number of tokens that are available in the game. This is depending on the number of players. Now, I say the number of players, it's actually the number of characters that you're going to be playing with. So in a solitaire game with only 1 player, it's going to be this amount. With 2 players, there would be more, so on and so forth. All right? So at the top, we have support tokens. Claiming these is going to be a prerequisite to being able to win the game. Then down below it are the conductor tokens. There are various numbers of conductor tokens there. And what those can allow, they allow the movement of escaped slaves escaped slaves through the map up towards Canada, which is ultimately the goal. And then the fundraising is exactly what you would think it would be. It would be fundraising and getting money for the cause, depending on where these slaves are actually located on the board, depending on the period of the game that is taking place. Now, down below that, we have the abolitionist queue down here. Now, during the first part of the game, the cards will be coming from the 1800 to 1839 deck as the game advances. Those will go away. That deck will come into play, and then eventually this deck to be able to fill out the queue. Now, above each of the queue, there is a cost associated to be able to purchase the card, and these will conveyor. So if you're familiar with any game that has a card market, as cards let's try that again. Cards will convey down to the right, fall off at the end. Now, in a solitaire or a 2-player game, at the end of a round, these 2 cards will come off, they will conveyor down, and then fill in over on the left. All right? Then, over here on the main board, we have a map of the eastern part of the U.S., and we have 3 plantations down here in the south. Should point out that these spaces here are not actually spaces. Those are just representative of the plantations that those represent. Now, above those, however, are various places in various towns and cities on the board. So over here on the south, all of these small green areas represent towns that are in the south, and these can hold one slave, one escaped slave per area. Any of the cities that have these locations can hold a maximum of 4 slaves per, and they will provide some amount of income as we go along, all right? So we have plantations, we have towns, we have cities, and then as we go further north, there are 5 slave catchers, which are exactly what they sound like. Slave catchers will try and pick up or try and capture the freed slaves or the escaped slaves before they reach Canada. And up north, we have the Canada, which is where the slaves are trying to get to be able to escape the slave catchers and to be free, which is one of the prerequisites to win the game. In the top right-hand corner, we have the card, or the, I guess you could call it the victory condition card over here in the top right. So it shows one of the goals is 5 slaves are freed, meaning there must be at least 5 up here in Canada. And this is one of the losing conditions if this ever gets filled and another captured slave or a non-placed slave needs to go onto that, then the game will end immediately. Then over on the right-hand side here, we have what is called the slave market. This is where slaves will be coming off from the ships, bringing them from the various parts of the world, mostly from Africa, going into the plantations out here. Any that cannot be placed will be lost, and that is represented by up there. And this is also the timer of the game, because the game will take place in a maximum of 8 rounds. Then there's a order of play, or how each round will take place. And then over on the right-hand side, we have the player tableau. So we have my character, which I have chosen the conductor to be my character. The conductor, so here it has a player aid here. It has the conductor card, which is a special card for that player specifically. Obviously, if there were more players, there would be more of these. And there is the potential for a reserved card to go over here, which can be used in, acquired from the abolitionist market or queue, and then put over here and then used at the appropriate time as it says. Now, I decided to mix up the chips a little bit. So we have 8, this represents dollars. So we have $8 here. And the first player marker, which isn't going to change because I'm playing a solitaire game. So I'm always the first player. Then we have the slave catcher dice. So during movement, I'm going to be rolling these, and however they come up is going to dictate the movement of the slave catchers. Then off board, we have more potential slaves over here, and then some other markers that are essentially out of the game for the rest of the game. All right? So that's everything that you guys are looking at here on the board. But how is it that you actually play the game? Well, as I mentioned, the game takes place over a total of maximum 8 rounds, and each round is going to consist of 5 different phases. Now, those 5 phases are listed right there. So you can see the first phase is the slave catcher phase, second phase is the planning phase, then the action phase, then the slave market phase, then the lantern phase, and everything is listed right there. All right? So, how do you play the game? Well, first and foremost, in the first phase of the game is the slave catcher phase, which says roll the slave catcher and movement dice. So what's going to happen is we're going to roll the dice, and however they end up, there are different symbols that represent the 5 slave catchers, and there's also the walking spot on the die. If the walking spot on the die comes up, no slave catchers will move during this phase. This is really good for us. We would like that to come up early and often. But whatever it is that's rolled, that slave catcher will move. How much and what direction they will move is going to be dictated by the movement die. The movement die has 6 sides, obviously, and it's going to have a 1 on the black arrow. It's going to have up to 3, and it's going to have 1 to 3 on the white arrow. So depending on what is rolled will dictate where the slave catchers will move. So as it is, let's say we went ahead and rolled the brown white 3, all right? So if we did, we then look at the brown slave catcher marker up here, and then you'll notice that there are two different colors of arrows, all right? So the slave catcher is going to move 3 spaces depending on the color of the actual slave catcher themselves. So you'll notice that the black arrows, which we rolled the white arrows, which we rolled 3 of, have a blue slave catcher white arrow and a brown white arrow slave catcher marker on it. So we're going to move him or her, it, 3 spaces along that path. So we would move it 1 here, following the white arrow again for the brown. That would be 2, and then following again the white arrow, moving down to the south. There we go. Moving down there for a 3rd space and would end up there. If there are any slaves in the final stopping spot of the slave catcher, they would then be captured. What happens in that case is they are then put over here into the slave market. If there are multiple, then the first one goes here, the second one goes there, the third one goes there, and then back at the beginning for a 4th one if there are. Now, as I mentioned earlier, each of these small towns can hold a maximum of 1 slave. Now, even if the brown slave marker, if there is a slave here, and a slave here, would not capture those, because continue the movement to the final spot, only would capture that one, and that one would then go out onto the card over here into the corner. Now, if a slave catcher would reach the end of the line, so to speak, so if the slave catcher were to make it all the way to here, they would then stop even if they had additional movement. They don't bounce. They don't go this way and then come back, and vice versa going the other direction up north. All right, so that is the slave catcher phase. The second phase then is the planning phase. So the planning phase says that each player, or in this case, me, can take up to 2 tokens from the active period column on the planning board. Well, in the first part of the game, only this column is available. As the game opens up, this column and this column will be available. And then finally, in the 3rd phase, all 3 columns will be available. There are 3 different types of tokens that can be acquired, or really, honestly, purchased. So the first one is the support token. These are going to be one of the victory condition. There are a total of 3 of them, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. They cost $10 each. You'll note that I start with a total of $8, so I'm going to have to acquire more money to even be able to afford to purchase one of those. That is one of the 2 things that must be met, arguably 3 things that must be met to win the game. All right? These, the next ones are the conductor tokens. Now, these conductor tokens cost $2 a piece, possibly $3 and possibly $4 as the game goes along. Those indicate how many slaves and how far they can move in a given action. All right? All right. So, in other words, this token here says I can move 3 different slaves, 1 space each. 4 different slaves, 1 space each. 2 slaves, 2 spaces each. Each slave can only be moved 1 time in a single action. So what I cannot do is I cannot move 1 slave 4 times. I cannot move 2 slaves 2 times, etc., like that. All right? So that is the conductor tokens. And finally, the fundraising tokens. There are 2 different colors. And these cost whatever the amount is up above. So you'll see that the fundraising token here costs $2, this costs $3, and as the game goes along, costs $4. These will convey $1 a piece for each slave on the colored city as shown. So during the first two phases first two parts of the game, green towns that have slaves in them will convey $1 per. And then in the third phase, the blue cities will convey $1 per slave. Now, some of the green cities can hold up to 4. It is 1 per slave, so it'll be $1 each. 1 for each of these that has a slave in it, and then 1 per slave depending on where they are on the board, whether it's north or south, depending on the time of the game. So, can acquire up to 2 of these of the available ones during the planning phase. All right. A moment while I drink some tea. All right. A moment. All right, now we move into the meat of the game, which is the action phase. So normally this would start with the lead player and then move on to the other players, but well, it's just me, so I'll just power through the action phase. All right, so during the action phase, there are a number of different things that players can do on their turn. They may take several actions in any order that they wish, and all of them are listed right there, okay? You can use your roll, you can play 2 tokens, you can buy an abolitionist card, or you may pass your entire action phase to be able to get money, all right? And actually, let me go ahead and show you guys this over here on my tableau. I suppose I could make that a little bit clearer. There we go, all right? So during the action phase, first thing that we'll talk about is you can choose to pass on the action phase, and depending on the period of the game, whether it's the first, the second, or the third phase, we'll get either $3, $4, or $5 for having skipped the action phase, all right? But if you choose to take any actions, your options are, as I showed you over here on the order of play, is you could play tokens, all right? So, play a maximum of 2 tokens. Now, these are disposable tokens. So, if I had acquired, say, one of those tokens there, that says I can move 3 slaves 1 space each. So, maybe I do something like that would be 1, that would be 2, and that would be 3. Something along the lines of that. Then, that token would then be removed from the game. Now, some of the tokens, you'll notice over here, have a different color to them. As we get there. There we go. So you'll notice that the white tokens are on top of the gray tokens. The gray tokens do not get discarded out of the game. They actually come back to the market over here to be able to be, they're available for purchase again. So there will always be multiple ones, or at least one available, depending on the time of the game, for purchase to be able to make use of those tokens. So movement, pretty simple, move them up there. Now, each time a slave is moved, however, a slave catcher, if the space is connected to one or more paths that feature a colored slave catcher path, the slave catchers that match the color of the connected path move 1 space towards the slave, all right? So let's go back to the original example here. So I can move 3 slaves 1 space. So I move this one. It is not connected to a slave catcher space. And if I moved 1 here and I moved 1 here, however, this one is connected to a slave catcher space. So then that slave catcher would move 1 towards because it is on the brown path. Now, if on a subsequent turn I had moved to here, you'll notice that it's on the brown and the orange path. Brown would move one there, orange would move one there, like so. If at any point a slave catcher reaches a spot where a slave or slaves are, first one goes here, second, third, fourth, so on, like so, okay? And what happens with these, I'll go over later on in the round. So any questions on that? Hopefully not. We will move on. That is playing a conductor token. You may also play a fundraising token because you're allowed to place or play a total of 2 different tokens during your action phase. Any mix of conductor and fundraising tokens. Fundraising tokens, if I had acquired this, I play it. And again, let's say it were something along the lines of this. He would have moved there. So I will get $1 per slave in green cities. $1, $2, $3. I would take $3 from the bank, add it to my supply, boom, done. Okay. That moves on. Hopefully no questions with that. So we've now covered playing the 2 tokens, and we've talked about passing. There are 2 other options that you can do. You can either use your roll or buy an abolitionist card. All right, so let's talk about, we'll start with using your roll, all right? So using your roll, each player's character has a special roll card on it. I have chosen the conductor, and it will have some sort of ongoing rule breaker up here for each character. So you'll see I get an extra $1 during the action phase. Awesome, that's always helpful. And I can move 2 slaves 1 space each during an action phase, and I can freely do that once per action phase. Cool. However, as a one-time per game special ability, my conductor says during your action phase, use 5 movement for 1 or more slaves. You can move 1 slave 5 spaces or split it up amongst as many slaves as you wish. But when I choose to use that, as you can see, a one-time and flip the card, and when you do so, you've used that. You cannot use that for the remainder of the game, but you still get your 2 little rule breakers ongoing each action phase for the remainder of the game. All right? So there we go. And I misspoke earlier, fundraising tokens are free. So I apologize. It doesn't make sense to buy fundraising tokens. The conductor tokens cost 2, fundraising tokens are free. I apologize. All right. The last available action that you can take have to do with the abolitionist cue cards over here. Now, there are 3 different types of, we will get there eventually, abolitionist cards or in the queue, or there are 3 different types of cards in the queue, I should say. There are general cards, which are, when you purchase them, they're immediately triggered. You do whatever it says down at the bottom, and then you discard it from play. Then there are reserve cards. Reserve cards are the white cards on here, and these are going to be placed in front of you in your reserve card spot on your tableau. You can only have 1 of these at a time. If you were to acquire a second one, the existing one that you had will just cease to exist. It will go away. And it triggers whenever it, says that it triggers. Then the 3rd type of card are opposition cards. These suck, and these make it harder for you to do things in the game. So you can see on this one, it says fundraising actions bring in $2 less than they normally would. And now these will have some sort of trigger. This one says in effect until removed from the game. So how does that happen? Well, as we get cards, they're going to conveyor down, and then you'll notice the 1 and 2 player, these 2 cards will then come out at the end of the round. So the cost is shown up above the cards, whether it's $1, $2, or $3 respectively. Obviously, you pay that to the bank, and that is that. All right, so that is the action phase. So after the action phase, we then will go into the slave market phase. The slave market phase says, as you can see here, deliver slaves to the plantations. All right, well, how does that work? Well, whatever the bottom card is over here. So in our case, these were randomly chosen or randomly shuffled and then drawn. And you'll notice that it shows for the number of players, 1, 1, 2, and 3, and 1. So there's going to be a total of 8 cards because, again, these are the timer of the game. So what's going to happen then is the bottom card, all of the slaves that are on this card, whether they're the 4 that come with it or any that were captured from the slave catchers, will then be added to any available space out here on the plantation. So you'll notice that we start with 5 spaces. There are 4 here, so early on, we're okay. So we place them as we choose out here onto the various plantations into the open spaces. However, if there are any slaves that there are not room for, unfortunately, one of the really ugly things that is abstracted in this game is slaves lost. They will come off of this card and go up here, and that is going to be one of the triggers for the end game in a bad way. If we ever, solo, have 12 up here and need to place a 13th, the game will end immediately. So that is the slave phase. Then the lantern phase takes place for the last part of the round. What that says is trigger or discard the last 2, in our case, abolitionist card, slide and fill cards. Now, what I did not say is whenever we purchase cards that we slide and refill. We do not refill this until the lantern phase each round. So we slide and fill the cards, then, well, in theory, pass the lead player lantern clockwise. If you were playing a solitaire game with multiple players, it still does pass. If this last slave market card has been delivered, the game is over, and then if the last slave market card is delivered, you check to see if you've won or lost, and that's that. The game you win the game if, in our case, 5 slaves are freed up to Canada, and we have purchased all 3 of the support tokens, and we finish the round without losing the game. So there are really 3 requirements on that. We lose the game if 13 slaves are lost. 12 get filled and then a 13th needs to be placed there. Or we do not win the game before the end of round 8. Now, if we do succeed, there is final scoring. 2 points for each slave that is freed. Lose 1 point for each slave lost. 10 points for freeing all the required slaves, in our case at least 5. And if the game was won, you're going to get 5 cards for each slave market card that remains at the end of the game. And that, folks, is how you play Freedom, the Underground Railroad. Now, before we get started, I'm going to read for each of the periods as we move into the periods. Oh, one thing I did not talk about is whenever a support token is purchased for a given period during the planning phase, that deck of cards will be removed, and then any cards that remain in the queue will remain, and then any cards that get filled from the lantern phase will now be taken from the new deck of cards. And that will obviously immediately free up the next period. So if as a first action, say in the second round, I purchase the support token of my first 2, I can choose that support token, and then I can purchase one of these because that will have opened up these tokens over here. All right? All right. So as I said, because we are in the first phase of the game, I'm going to actually talk about or read in the back of the rule book for each phase what's going on in that period of American history as it relates to this period, this subject, this fill in the right words here. And I may convey an anecdote or anecdotal story as we go along, just personal history with this stuff as well. I may or may not. We'll see how it goes. All right, a moment for some tea. From revolution to the age of immediatism. In 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, announcing that the 13 original colonies considered themselves separate from the British Empire. Though the colonies had declared themselves independent and free, the slaves that inhabited the new nation were not given the same liberty. Despite the Declaration of Independence statement that, quote-unquote, all men are created equal, almost every state supported slavery during the founding of the nation. But the concept of slavery was falling out of fashion with many European and American statesmen, religious leaders, and philosophers of the day. The efforts of abolitionists continued throughout the American Revolutionary War. The concept of liberty, which was such an integral part of the Declaration of Independence, was often used to support arguments against slavery by Revolutionary-era figures such as Thomas Jefferson. In 1780, the Pennsylvania legislature passed, quote, an act for the gradual abolition of slavery, end quote, which banned importation of slaves to Pennsylvania and required that all future children in Pennsylvania born into slavery be freed when they reached 28 years of age. This type of gradual abolition was a common theme for late 18th and early 19th century abolitionists. Anti-slavery advocates, such as Benjamin Franklin, were convinced that a slow transition from a slave state to a free nation was necessary. It was believed that changing too quickly would bring about a state of chaos, something to be avoided at all costs. Several other states followed Pennsylvania's lead, and by 1804, all states north of the Mason-Dixon line had either abolished slavery or created gradual abolition laws similar to Pennsylvania. The Mason-Dixon line, as you see here, south of Pennsylvania, south of West Virginia, south of Ohio and Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa. All right. Abolition activities from 1800 to 1835 tended to focus on three main objectives: politically voicing opinions against slavery, giving legal aid to kidnapped free blacks and fugitive slaves, and finally, building educational and financial support for free black communities. The Act for Gradual Abolition had formed a border against slavery along the Mason-Dixon line. Many fugitive slaves attempted to reach the North in hope of achieving freedom, and abolitionist groups were there to assist them. All right. So with that said, I think at this point we will actually begin the game. And as we move into the second phase, I will read the next part in the back of the rule book. All right? All right, let's bring up the cameras. There and there. Hey, y'all. Hi. All right. So, let's see. We will put that there. A moment. How's everybody doing today? Hopefully y'all are having a good Friday, whether you are working or whether you are just chilling out and hanging out. I appreciate it. And I will also bring up the camera up here as well. All right. Let's get to it, shall we? All right, so we go into phase one. Phase one, roll the slave catcher and movement dice, as shown right there. All right, let's do it. Hopefully we get no movement, but all right, we will see how this goes. All right, the brown slave catcher will move 2 along the white path. All right, so we will actually go there. All right. So during the first couple rounds, I'm going to take this pretty slow. And we'll put that there. There we go. Hey. All right. So the brown slave catcher is going to move 2 along the white path. The white path for brown slave catcher should be up here. We'll actually move. So that'll be 1 along the white path, 2 along the white path. Boom. There. That's where he's hanging out. All right. The second phase says, it's a planning phase. I can take up to 2 tokens, as you can see in the planning phase. So this is where you guys are going to help out now with what do we do. We have a total, as you can see, of $8. Okay? So we could take a fundraising token. The problem with the fundraising token is right now, fundraising actions bring $2 less. We cannot afford the support token. So I'm of the mind that we're going to spend at least $2 to take one of these. So there's that. We'll go ahead and put that over here onto there. We'll spend the $2. So now I ask you, Peanut Gallery, what do we do? Do we take a second token? Do we take the fundraising token for free? Do we take a second one of the conductor tokens? What say you? Hey, Peter. My mailman in the house. What's up? So welcome, everybody. All right, let me catch up on chat. And Bernardo says, remember, you don't have to use the tokens. That is true. So he thinks buying the fundraiser for now. What say y'all? Come on. There's a bunch of y'all. I mean, we could. Or we could buy a second one for $2. Because, again, we don't have to use it now. We could always do it for the next round. All right. Oh, yeah, I suppose we ought to go over what the cards are. That's a very good point. So we'll start, we'll start on the left, and we'll work our way over. All right. Good call. Yeah, good call. So we have Samuel Joseph May, and it says, gain $1 for any slaves in spaces connected to New York. All right. Then Levi Coffin, which is the 1 reserve card. This says, during any player's action phase, so mine, ignore the movement of 1 slave catcher if they would capture a slave and then discard the card. So it basically protects the movement of 1 slave space there. Okay. Also, not bad. The crappy card is fundraising actions, bring in $2 less there. And then this one is Liberty Hill, says move 2 slaves 1 space each and purchase a token at full cost. That's awfully, awfully good. And the last card is Theodore Weld, says move 1 slave from any plantation to a southern space with no effect, meaning nothing happens. You don't get any benefit, you don't get any money, you get nothing for it, but it's a free movement. All right? So there we go. Hey, Martin. Denmark in the house. Cool. All right. I'm okay. I think we go ahead and get the fundraising token just to have it. It's free. We might as well. So there we go. All right. Chat seems a little slow today. So there we go. All right. So now we are into the next phase of the game. We've done the slave catcher phase. We've done the planning phase. We're now into the action phase. The action phase says, starting with the lead player, or i.e. me, I can either pass to get $3. I could use my roll. I could play up to 2 tokens, and I can buy an abolitionist card of my choice. Well, I'm of the mind that I do want to buy a abolitionist card, and cheaper is always better, in my opinion. So one of the $1 cards for right now is, got that in the wrong space, sorry about that, the Liberty Hill, being able to move 2 slaves 1 space and purchase a token at full cost. That seems like a pretty good card. So and this one's going to go away if we don't purchase it. So I think we do go ahead and purchase this one. So that will cost us $1. And it immediately happens. Move 2 slaves 1 space. I will go 1 there. And I will go 1 there. Yeah, I'm good with that. And we can purchase a token at full cost. You know what? Let's go ahead and do that. So I will pay $2, getting 3 back. And I'll go ahead and purchase that token there. So that is one of the available actions done. Buying an abolitionist card, this card's going to go out of play, so we're just going to move it off board. There. Okay. All right, what are our other options? We can use our roll. We could play up to 2 tokens. Can't pass now since we've actually taken an action. So I'm thinking we go ahead and play one of the tokens. Now, thing to keep in mind, you cannot pass through. Each of the small towns can have a maximum of 1 slave. So I could not do that. So I need to be aware of that, but I will go ahead and use one of these guys, which is the move 3 different slaves, 1 space. So you know what? We'll go, I think that's okay. That'll be 1. And because this is on the purple line, the slave catcher, the purple slave catcher will move 1 space there. So that was 1. We'll go ahead and bring another one up. That's 2. I'm reticent to move any of the slaves off this plantation. I could move them over here to Charleston if I so wished, because of the fact that getting out here to be able to move via ship, but you'll notice that it costs $1 to be able to move via ship. Money is tight. I don't think I like the idea of doing that. Plus, if I were to move any up here, it would move the brown slave catcher there, and if he moves there, it would then immediately be captured. I don't like the idea of doing that. Now, we could move this one up here, but you know what? I think we'll go ahead there. And so the yellow slave catcher will actually move down 1 space because we're on the yellow line there. So that's one of the available tokens. Now we could use another if we wanted to. I don't think we do. And the fundraising, it would get us $2 less. So we would get, a moment, I think I missed the step. Hold on, sorry. Yes, all right. When this slave moved into St. Louis, I should have taken $2. So there we go. Now that can hold 4. So it is interesting to note that if I do choose to move the 3 and 1, I could go 1, 2, but keep in mind the purple's going to move 1, 2 if I were to do that. That's risky. It would get me an extra $4, which is awesome, but careful with that. I could use the fundraising token. The fundraising token would get me $1, 2, 3, $4 minus $2. So it'll get me $2. I don't think that's good use of that. All right. We only have 8 rounds. But you know what? I don't think we use the token right now. And the peanut gallery is not helping in that regard. Feel free to chime in here, guys, if you guys feel strongly one way or the other. Take care, Bobby, and thanks. He says, great to finally see a great playthrough of this important historic game. Hopefully you can shed some light on this tragic time in our history with levity. I will have to finish the stream later. I don't want to make light of anything, obviously. I'm trying not to make it too lighthearted because, I mean, the subject matter is about as heavy as it gets, right? I could use my special ability. Oh, right, my regular special ability. Good call. My special ability, my regular one, is, remember, so and we'll move that there, says I get a buck during the action phase, so don't mind if I do. I'll take that buck. There we go. And I can move 2 slaves 1 space during the action phase. Thanks for the reminder. So I can move 2 different slaves 1 space each. I think I will go 1 there, which will get me 2 bucks, and we'll move the purple 1 space over closer. So that will get me another 2 bucks. So we're back to our original $8. I do not want to move any of these over for the simple fact that I don't want to move the purple over. I don't want to move these guys up here because then that'll move the blue over. So I'm thinking we do something down south. Now we could risk, but I think it's an unnecessary risk over here. Although, you know what? Now that I think about it, I wonder if moving one of these over to Charleston and coming up here to Boston might not be a terrible idea, because if we were to make it over to New York, that would pull the blue and the brown over this direction up there. That is a tough call on that. What say you? Yeah, exactly. And Goose Arena brings up, there's your boat fare. So you know what? I think we will. So we will take one of these guys and move them over into Charleston. And before we go any further, hey, Bobby, cheers. Thank you for the support. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you. Go to pledgehc.com, support the show. Like Bobby, definitely would be appreciated. All right. And Gustav says, emptying out the slaves from the plantations, getting them out on the Underground Railroad. They fill up fast. All right. Oh, shoot. St. Louis is a small city. That is a good point. Let's give up $2 and move the purple back 1. Thank you, Christopher. Good catch. So I still have one more movement that I can do. So if that's the case, we will go ahead and go there, which will bring the purple back there. Thanks for the correction. There you go. So now, and Bernardo says, try and end up with $10 so that you have the option to buy the support token if we wish. If we were to use the other movement token, 3 slaves can move 1 space. Could move that one there, but that doesn't help us to get money. But it does get us closer to Boston or New York. That would cost us $1. Then moving this one over here to Ripley would get us $1. So that would offset that. And that's pretty much, yeah, we're not going to be able to get. I suppose we could, if we were to go 1 there and 1 there, would give us a total of $3. But moving them over closer, trying to make it our way out, I don't know if that's the best idea here. Because St. Louis is a small city, we have to be able to free that city up to then be able to put another slave into St. Louis to get the money for it. All right, what the hell? Let's go ahead and use the token anyways. So we can move 3 slaves 1 space. each. You know what? We need the money, right? Bernardo says, I have one move left. One extra move on my ability. Oh, do I? Did I stop one short? Then if so, I'll pay the buck, go there. And then we have the 3 from the token. So now, there we go. We will go 1 there, which will give us $3. When we do so, we move the blue 1 this direction, and we move the brown 1 direction there. So that's 1. So we are now at 8. We need $2 more. That's 9. That goes there. And we'll go ahead and go there. That is 10. I think it's worth the risk. Actually, we'll do it that way. There we go. Okay, cool. There we go. So that is, I think, the end of the action phase as far as what we're going to do. So we took our roll actions, we played 2 tokens, we bought an abolitionist card. We're done. So now we go into the slave market phase. Deliver slaves to the plantation. All right, there are only 4 here. These 4 will go 1, 2, 3. And we'll put 1 back into the middle. That card is out there. These will slide down. Five more come out. That is the slave market phase. Now we go into the lantern phase, and the lantern phase says, trigger, discard the last 2, in our case, abolitionist cards, slide and fill the card, so we'll do that. So this card will then go out of play. Those will slide down, and then we're still in the first phase. So here we go. All right, so let's take a look at what the cards are as they come out. Here we go. So the first one is St. Catharines, Ontario. Says move 1 slave from a large northern city to Canada, eh? So just 1 automatically gets freed. That's awesome. The second card is Lane Theological Seminary. Says move 2 slaves 1 space or purchase a token at a $2 discount. Any of the available tokens. That'll be good for a little bit later. All right. Take care, Gooserino. All right. Move past the lead player token, which obviously we're not going to do, and check and see if the game has ended. Well, we're only starting or ending the end of the first of 8 rounds, so that didn't happen. So we go back to the beginning. We are 1/8 of the way maximum done. So here we go. Let's roll. Let's hope for a walk-in. Blue, 1 white. So blue moves along the white path right there to Chicago. Done. All right, that's that phase. Second phase is take up the 2 tokens. All righty. Well, we do have $10 if we wish to purchase that token there, or we can purchase the reusable token for $2. Now, if we take the $10, obviously that's all our money, but immediately we will go into the second phase there and it will open up those tokens. So what say you, Peanut Gallery? What do y'all want to do? we can get up to 2 tokens, which in our case we can purchase this by itself, or we could purchase this and one of the fundraising tokens, because those are free and we be broke, yo. So what do y'all want to do? I'll hang up and listen for a minute and drink some tea. All right. Hey, John, what's up? Buy the move and build up to good fundraising. Everybody seems to be in agreement on that, and I'll be honest, that's kind of what I was leaning towards anyways. So I agree. We have a total of $10. We'll go ahead and pay our $10. So we will take the support token. That is one of the prerequisites. We need the other 2. And for the second one is we have a fundraising token. So we now have those. The support token we're just going to put here because it's just going to hang out. That's one of the prerequisites. So now what happens? These cards out of the game. Okay. So out. Not going to look at it. I'm going to put the discards at the bottom, and there we go. Okay. We are now in the second phase of the game. So let's bust out the second phase. Here we go. We read that one already. Nope, here we go. The Age of Immediatism, 1830 to 1860. Slavery in the South continued to expand despite the banning of the international export and import of slaves by the United States in 1808. Slavery had simply become too important to the production of cash crops, such as tobacco and cotton, which in turn had a major impact on the national economy. Many began to feel that previous attempts at abolition were not working and additional, more urgent measures needed to be taken. John Brown, for example, called for immediate action and led several skirmishes, including the raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859, where he and his followers attempted to capture munitions for use in an armed slave revolt. A less violent, by the way, there are some really good videos on YouTube about the Harper's Ferry attack, if you will, the raid on it. A less violent alternative that began to take hold among some circles of abolitionists was the late 18th century concept of colonization, where blacks would return to form colonies in Africa. Thousands of free black Americans settled in Africa in the following decades. These abolitionist actions intensified the controversy of race and racial integration throughout the United States. Print media became more widespread during this period as well. Theodore Weld, who was the editor of the abolitionist paper The Emancipator from 1836 to 1840, helped pen the book American Slavery as It Is, Testimony of 1,000 Witnesses, which described the horrors of slavery through first-hand accounts. The influence of this work was second only to that of Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Uncle Tom's Cabin, published in 1852, was an anti-slavery novel that quickly became popular and was outsold in the United States only by the Bible. Slavery supporters were enraged by the book's content. Additionally, the writing of escaped slaves, such as Frederick Douglass's Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, helped to solidify positions in the slavery debate. Tensions climbed between anti- and pro-slavery proponents as these books, newspapers, and other abolitionist publications spread anti-slavery ideas and drew more individuals to the abolitionist cause. This tension culminated in the secession of southern pro-slavery states from the United States and finally erupted into an open confrontation that cost hundreds of thousands of American lives, and that is the American Civil War. Hey, Tony. Yeah, and that's a good point. Bernardo brings up, we removed 2 of the bad cards that were in this deck, so that's actually a good thing. They didn't come out, so that's a positive. All right. Oh, and that's a good idea. Make us. Yeah, that's a good call. Read the flavor text as the cards come out. That's a good idea. So it's about the theme, right? So I will cover all of these. Now, this is super small print, so I'm not going to zoom in on it. I could, but I'll just read it. So Lane Theological Seminary says, one of the first public dialogues on slavery was organized by Theodore Dwight Weld and held over 18 days at the seminary in 1834. The next one is St. Catharines, Ontario. St. Catharines was the final stop on the Underground Railroad for hundreds of slaves in the 1820s. Samuel Joseph May says, a good friend of William Lloyd Garrison. May helped found the New England, the American, and the Massachusetts anti-slavery societies. Hey, that's home now. Levi Coffin, it was one of the most powerful forces in the Underground Railroad. Levi Coffin helped thousands of slaves prior to and after emancipation. Thousands of slaves. That's amazing to me. The 1850 Compromise. While diffusing the confrontation between slave and free states, it also strengthened the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. That's the one that crushes our fundraising action. All right. Glenn says, quite a light game from what we're used to from you. Yeah, right? Oh, just wait till next week's. And Makis says, Harry Beecher Stowe responded to critics by writing A Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1853, wherein she basically documented her portrayal of slavery and the mentality of the owners. So, all right, good stuff. See, and this is the amazing thing about doing these live streams with you guys as opposed to pre-recorded content is I don't know everything. I hardly, right? But some of you guys know a lot of this stuff, and that's, to me, is pretty amazing. So that's awesome. So I appreciate the context. I can give some anecdotal stuff, which I may do as we go along. There were definitely some eye-opening events that have taken place in my life, one specific one, but I'll talk about that later. So we are done with the planning phase of the second round. We are now going to go into the action phase. And the action phase says, starting with the lead player. Again, I can use my role and my special ability, play up to 2 tokens by an abolitionist card. All right. So, special abilities, get a buck. Don't mind if I do. There's that. You know what? Actually, what I'm going to do, so I don't forget that I've done it, is I'm going to put that on the first one, and then have the second one available for when I do that, which is move 2 slaves 1 space each during the action phase. So we have 6 slaves coming out. We have 6 spots, so we will not overflow yet. But we do need to get them moving. So a couple things that I'm thinking. Moving this slave up here, which will bring the orange over 1 space, and bringing this one over, say, to Ferrisburg there, which would bring the yellow over 1. I would like to be able to move the blue in a perfect world, so I could actually move up here. But the problem with that is, as you can see, Ferrisburg is 1 spot away from Canada, whereas here we add another space. it gives us an opportunity for another dollar, but it also gets us one spot further away from Canada. However, being able to move both of the slave catchers eventually over, I think is a pretty good idea. The brown one is far enough away for right now, so I think we will go ahead and do our free action there, and we will go 1 and get another buck, and that moves the blue slave catcher over there. And so the plan was to move that. That would move the orange there, but if I move here, that brings the blue there as well. And we don't have any other movement other than this. Oh, and Christopher, being a Canuck, says for reference, St. Catharines is on the south coast of the L in L, Ontario. So let's actually bring that. Let's zoom in on that. Okay. So here, along the south coast, he said, on the L in Ontario. So that is where St. Catharines is located, somewhere right around in this area. So awesome. That's good stuff. Thanks, man. Tony says, Helen and I have still never beaten this game. Yeah, me either. So there's that. And actually, John brings up a good point. Fill up the green spaces and generate revenue. But the problem is, you know what? I actually like that idea better. Okay, John. We'll back that up and move that back. So we still have 2 movement. So why don't we do this? That'll be 1 there, move that there, and that'll be 1 there. I think that's a good idea. Because now, if we were to generate income with both of our tokens, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all in southern cities. That would be 5, $10 minus 2 each, so that'd actually only be $6. Or do we wait? We need to be able to make enough money to be able to do that, though. I think we have to use one of them. $6 is still pretty good out of the fundraising, right? Let's use them both. At $2 though. Then again, we could spend $1 to buy out that card and then use the 2 tokens. Because this card's in effect until it's removed from the game, so that would actually save us, that would make us $3. However, it doesn't allow us to buy the Levi Coffin card, which is nice, but not vital. I kind of like it. That's it for movement. Unless we wanted to use the special ability, which allows me to move 5 spaces total between all the slaves, but I don't know. 1, 2, but that would capture that slave. That's bad. Could go 1, 2, 3 for $2. No, we're not. No, that's it. You know what? I got to make some decisions and can't count on you guys completely. So I'm going to spend the $1 to purchase this card out of the game. Then I'm going to use the 2 fundraising tokens to then be able to get $1 per city that has a slave in it. The southern cities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to be a total of $10. That feels like good use of those tokens, if nothing else. There we go. I'm good with that. All right. Take care, John. Hey, Trevor. Rocky says there's a fantastic monument in downtown Detroit for the railroad stop into Windsor, Ontario. That's really cool. All right, so we have used our 2 tokens. I feel pretty good about that. I think that was good use of it. All right, so we have used our roll. We've played 2 tokens, and we bought an abolitionist card. So we're pretty much done with the action phase. So we're going to do the slave market phase. Slave market, all 6 are coming out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Keep track of that. So we are 2 rounds done. At least there's only 4 coming out on that one. And again, these were shuffled and are random. That's nice. And now we do the lantern phase. In the lantern phase, discard the last 2 cards, fill the cards, and that's it. So Levi, take care. Done. Those will slide down. And now we have new cards that come out. All right. So this is going to be, remember, we're in the second phase, so we're taking cards from the 1849 to 1859 deck now. All right. So we have Anthony Burns, and it says, move 1 slave from a large northern city directly into Canada, A. Okay, it doesn't say the A, but work with me. And you know what? Now that we're here, let's go ahead and make it to where you guys can. Oops. Normally I don't freehand this stuff during the streams, but there we go. So the text says, Burns' arrest and trial under the Fugitive Slave Act brought protests and riots, and Burns eventually settled in Canada. So good stuff. All right. All right, next card is Henry Box Brown, and it says, move 1 slave from any plantation to a large northern city with no effect. So just basically transports it. So, okay. And Brown shipped himself to freedom in a box by wagon, railroad, steamboat, wagon, railroad, ferry, railroad, and wagon. Damn. Wow. Huh? Wow. All right. Both of those are excellent cards for us, but they're too expensive right now, so not looking at that. All right, so we are now into the 3rd round. Back to slave catcher phase. You know, walking, that'd be great. Okay. Hey, hey! We going Sizzler. All right, no slave catcher phase this round. Well, technically that was the slave catcher phase, but no slave catchers move. So that's cool. Now the planning phase, take up to 2 tokens. All right. Well, we do have $10, but we have no movement, and we need to get moving because if we don't, we only have space for 2 slaves. Now, I do have my 2 additional actions over here, so I could move 2 out, which would give us a little bit of room, which would satisfy this. So, moral of the story is we could buy the support token right now, which is, again, one of the prerequisites. But that means we could not buy either of those, but we could also get the fundraising token for free. So that would be powering through. And again, I believe there are, a moment while I check, there are 4 opposition cards in this deck here. So keep that in mind, all right? Chris says, already floored by how powerful this is. It's not a losing a cube. It's seeing a slave taken back against their will to horrendous conditions. Must make the choices in this game so agonizing. Yes, and that's one of the really, really ugly things about this is the agonizing part is sometimes you will need to sacrifice a life in order to move slave catchers away so that the greater good, so that some more can survive, which is a horrible decision, right? So yeah. So we have $10. What do we do? Now you'll note that we could buy either of those, move 4 escaped slaves 1 space or 2 spaces each. Because we have our move 2 slaves 1 space during the action phase ability to be able to put 1 in Charleston and put 1 here. And taking the support token, that's awfully tempting. I'm not going to lie, because that would free up the 4 spaces, but then we better get moving after that. We would be able to get a crap ton of money than this round is, or reasonable crap ton of money. You know what? We are going to try it. So let's get aggressive. So it's going to be $10. We're going to take the support token, which again, that's now 2 of the 3 that we need to get, along with getting 5 slaves freed. That seems like a good idea. And now, we do have access to all of these now. These are now open. So these cards are actually all going away. Okay? But because we have so many in the South, I think we take that fundraising token and add it over there. That is now a second token. So we are done with the planning phase. And the planning phase take up to 2 tokens. So why don't we? And we did. All right. So we are now into the 3rd phase, going into the action phase. But we are now in the 3rd one. So let's continue our trek through history. This one's a little bit of a longer read, but you know what? If you're watching this, I imagine you're interested in the history. So here we go. A moment. The Underground Railroad. While abolitionist groups debated the best way to achieve their anti-slavery goals, there was an immediate need for assisting fugitive slaves escape bondage. Most active in the decade prior to the American Civil War, the resistance movement known as the Underground Railroad assisted more than an estimated 100,000 slaves escape to freedom over the course of its operation. The Underground Railroad was a network of transportation routes, safe houses, and meeting points which escaped slaves could use to escape to freedom in the northern states and Canada. The Ohio River was one such route commonly used by fugitives. Those who took this route to freedom knew they had to reach the north once their river journey brought them to the Rankin House, better known as Liberty Hill, in Ripley, Ohio, which is right here. Those operating the Underground Railroad protected themselves by only being familiar with their portion of it. Operatives, known as conductors, would provide guidance to small groups of escaped slaves along the portion of their route. Travelers typically moved at night and stayed in safe houses known as depots or stations during the day. These small bands would continue on until they reached their final destination and freedom. The success of the Underground Railroad also relied upon the political support and financial funding of individuals, groups, and politicians. So that is what the fundraising represents, as well as the support tokens is that general support that we are gaining as abolitionists. Escaping by the Underground Railroad was far from safe. for both fugitive or conductor. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which we just covered in that card, stated that all escaped slaves must be returned to their master. What a horrible word that is in that regard, isn't it? Must be returned to their master upon capture, requiring officers of the law in free states to assist in the capture of escaped slaves. This act was much more difficult for Northerners to ignore than the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, which simply granted slaveholders the authority to capture their escaped slaves. Underground Railroad workers, such as Harriet Tubman, who had escaped slavery to Philadelphia in 1849, were at great risk of being captured and themselves pressed into slavery or worse. Anthony Burns escaped slavery in 1853 and was arrested in 1854 in the northern free city of Boston. His trial and return to the South generated protests in Boston and the death of a deputy U.S. Marshal. We just had his card come out. William Still, a conductor for the Underground Railroad, helped hundreds of slaves escape to freedom and provided much of the detail we know today through a journal he kept that contained details and interviews with those that he helped reach freedom, which in and of itself is amazing, I think. On April 12th, 1861, the American Civil War began with the Battle of Fort Sumter. At the onset of the war, there were an estimated 4 million slaves in the United States, about 10% of the U.S.'s population. The South's commanding general, Robert E. Lee, surrendered on April 9th, 1865. In December of that same year, so what is that? That is 8 months later, the 13th Amendment was ratified, officially abolishing slavery in the United States. Though the war itself was a great tragedy, it brought an end to the American institution of slavery. The work of the abolitionists helped cease an era of oppression and suffering and gave the United States an opportunity to rebuild its social structures and pursue equality for all, as stated in its Declaration of Independence. That was written by Matt Shoemaker, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. So that was good stuff. So a little bit of history as to what it is we're actually doing here, right? Yeah, and Kabuki said it's a great game, very emotional. Somehow the stakes feel higher than in other co-ops. I agree, because this just feels more real, I guess, because it's very, very, very abstractly modeling history, right? And Vincent says, every slave lost in this game makes me sad, but you cannot win this game without some human loss. That is an unfortunate fact. All right, so the action phase, starting with the lead player, use your role. And you know what? We will actually go ahead and do both of those actions real quick. So we will get our $1, and then we're going to move 2 slaves. We're going to move 1 into Charleston. We're going to move 1 there. No slave catchers moved because, well, there were none that were moved on the lines, so we do not need to do that. We can play up to 2 tokens. You know what? We're just going to play our 1 token that we have here. That 1 token is going to allow us to get $1 for every small city in the South that has a slave. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and $7. That seems good. All right, we have money. Now we can take a look at possibly purchasing a card up here. So let's go back over the cards because I feel like, well, I mean, that kind of, yeah, this is going to be important. Ooh, tough calls. All right, so here we go. So starting with the dollar cards. Samuel Joseph May, you can gain $1 for any slave in spaces connected to New York. It's only $1. Doesn't seem terribly important right now, so we're not going to bother with that. St. Catharines says move a slave from a large city, northern city, to Canada. Okay? So that would move the one that is in New York currently up to Canada. Boom. And that's 1/5 of what we need. So for $1, that doesn't seem terrible. All right. Now moving over to the next two cards. Here, the Lane Theological Seminary. This one's kind of tempting as well. Move 2 slaves, 1 space each, or purchase 1 token, which any of the tokens are available for $2. Huh. Okay. And well, we'll come back to that one. And the other one over here, the last two, which are this one's $2, is move 1 slave from a large northern city directly to Canada. So basically it's the exact same as the other one, but more expensive. So we're not going to do that. And then Henry Box Brown is move 1 slave from any plantation straight to a northern city with no effect. Just transport 1 via the box. Okay. So now the Lane Theological Seminary allows us to buy a token for $2 cheaper. Now, we can purchase either of those, or better yet, we could purchase one of these for $2. Move 5 slaves, 1 space, or 3 slaves, 2 spaces. That also awfully tempting. Moving 3 slaves, 2 spaces is awfully good for, that would be, the problem is that would cost us $4. That's tough. In a moment, I want to double check one thing real quick. It's where the escaped slaves, where they end their movement is what money they would get depending on what cities they're in up here. All right. So if, for instance, I were to go say 1, 2, I would not get that $1 because I did not end movement on that space. That's what I wanted to note. And after the movement is done, the slave catchers move. So they don't move in the interim. All right. Chris says, I really appreciate when you take time for historical flavor in your historical gameplays. I mean, I feel like that's how it should be done. But I'm glad. Thank you. So looking at the cheap cards, for $1, I can move 1 into Canada. It's okay. And it's less movement that we need to move. So this one in New York. Buying the Lane Theological Seminary for essentially what is $3 to get $3 or $4 to get one of those. I think it makes sense to wait until the next round to get that card. So it's either St. Catharines or nothing. Oh, boy. Let's go ahead and do it. I think so. Yeah. Man, getting that movement's awfully nice, though, isn't it? Yep, we're going to do that. So we'll pay $1. We will purchase the St. Catharines, Ontario card, move 1 slave from a large northern city to Canada. So, hey, fantastic. We're on the board. We have saved 1 life right there. That's awesome. Good deal. Now, the other option that we have left is we could use our free 5 movement if we want, any mix of it. 1, 2. I think we save that for next round. I think next round is when we're probably going to look to do that. I think so. So I think we're done. So we've used our rolls, we've played our tokens, only 1, and we bought an abolitionist card. All right. So now we go into the slave market phase, and the slave market phase says, deliver slaves to the plantations. So these 4 will take up the 4 spaces that we have available. We are now 3 rounds essentially complete. We have 5 coming out, which is a big, scary number. Ay vey. And we have 6 more. I feel like the silence during these periods here just feels heavy also. You know what I mean? So lantern phase. Discard the last 2 cards. The game didn't end. Okay, so Samuel Joseph May will go away. These will slide down. Now we have the 3rd one. All right, so here we go. Ugh, not a good start there. So we have U.S. Marshals. A moment, I'm going to try and center this a little bit, so zoom in on the text. Yeah, maybe that's not so bad. Oops, sorry guys. This is why I don't freehand this normally. All right, so it says, all slave catchers immediately return to their starting cities. Triggers when removed, and it cannot be purchased. So that's going to go in maximum 2 rounds, so it does not happen right now. It says U.S. Marshals were responsible for enforcing federal laws and were expected to return runaway slaves back to their owners in the South despite public opinion or their own personal beliefs. That had to be tough. The artwork on this card too, right? Yeah, that's ugly, ain't it? Oof. All right. All right, okay, second card. So that does not happen right now. It says triggers when removed, so we do not have to, don't have to mess with that right now. The next card, thankfully, is not negative, is contrabands. All right. Like I said, don't normally, but it says move up to 3 slaves in small southern spaces to small northern spaces up to 2 spaces away with no effect, meaning they get no money, but they also do not move these slave catchers. Early in the war, hundreds of thousands of slaves escaped across Union lines, prompting the building of camps and schools for them. So that's good. All right. All right. So that was the lantern phase. We go into the next round. Next round now. Can we get lucky again? Can we roll the slave catcher and movement dice and get another walking symbol? That'd be awesome. Alas, no. Blue moves to white. That's not good. All right, well, that's not good. So blue moves to white, 1 and 2. So unfortunately, we have our first captured slave. So that now goes down there, so that's now going to be 6. But also it's just crappy. Not just from a mechanical standpoint, right? All right. And yeah, Tony said this is very much some of the heaviest cardboard. I agree. All right, so the planning phase. Planning phase. All right, take up the 2 tokens. Okay, so all of the tokens are now in play. We have a total of $7 at our disposal. And there we go. So we definitely need to buy some tokens. We cannot purchase the final support token. So we're not going to. But we need movement more than we need anything else. So I'm of the mind that we get 1 and 1. The question is, what do we get, right? So let's take a look at the board. So we have 4 and 1, 5 and 1, 2 and 2, or 3 and 2. And we cannot buy 2 of the more expensive ones. So I think we definitely need one of the 2 movement ones. Honestly, to move this Charleston 1 and 2, to be able to, A, get the $3, but also brown would move over 1 and blue would move over 1. Question is, do we want to move blue over 1? Because if we move this escaped slave from St. Louis up to Chicago, we would move the blue 1, and unfortunately we would move the orange, so that's a bad idea. However, we could always move this here, which pulls orange down, but if we pull orange down, then that captures that escaped slave in Ripley. But we have to clear this out. So if we were to get the 5 and 1, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 3, 4. That only frees up 2 spaces. We could go 5, which frees up a 3rd space, but then, well, potentially frees up a 3rd. Oh boy, this is really hard. Then again, what if we were to do, say, the 2 and 2, and we take the St. Louis to move it up there, which pulls orange out, which, you know what, without overthinking this too much, I'm going to go the 2 and 2 and the 5 and 1 for $7, and we'll see if that was a terrible job of not planning this. So we're going to do the 2 and 2 first. You have to complete one before you move on to the other. So the 2 and 2, I'm definitely going to go here. 1, 2, which is going to move orange 1, and it gets us $1. Then the second one, you cannot move through slave catchers. We could move this one, spending $1 to move up to Boston, which would pull brown over. But again, this really isn't freeing up a whole lot of space, is it? What do we do? we are going to need some money. So we're going to pay $1. We're going to go 1, 2, moves there, and that gets us $3 back. Then on the 5 and 1, hold on, before we do that, we're going to get the $1, and to get the 2 free movement, we'll go 1, brings that there. 2 brings that there. Then we have 5 movement, 1 each. And that 5 and 1 will actually come back out here. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3. So you know what? I'm going to put these down below their cities to show that they've moved already, so I cannot move those. That's 3. Four. Got another escaped slave free. And I'm going to go 5, which moves that there. So that's the end of that. Now, we do have our special ability, which allows us to move up to 5 if we want. 5's any mix that we want. I think we are going to use it. So we're going to flip it over, and we get 5 movement now. $1, which brings that there and gets us $1. 2, which costs us $1. 3, which gets us $3. That's 3 of the 5, which gets brown there and blue there. So we have 2 left. One there and one there. I think so. Last one also moves orange. What? Did it? Did I miss a movie? Oh, that goes there. Okay. Thank you, Gustav. Okay. So that is all my movement. Whew, wow, this is stressful. Legitimate. I feel like, yeah, this is just stressful. All right. So we have used our roll. We played our 2 tokens. We have not bought an abolitionist card if we wish to do so. Now, this would allow for the 2 cards that are cheapest. I cannot purchase this card. I do not wish to purchase this card yet, but I do wish to purchase one of those, I think. So that moves 1 from any large northern city to Canada. Honestly, I think this is the more beneficial. Yeah, I think buying that for $1 and then giving us options, but it triggers immediately. Getting more movement is probably a good idea. And immediate movement because then, so 2 and 1 or 2. So I'm going to purchase this card. So it's going to cost us $1. So we're going to purchase that. Now the question is, what do we do with it? Do we do 2 escaped slaves, 1 space? That is a safe movement and gets us our $1 back. And then I can move that up, which would free up another space. So 1, no, it does not. I'm making things up. If I move this, unfortunately, the orange slave catcher would capture here, but the second one could come out to where we're going to lose 1 no matter what. So does that help us? I don't think it does. Another option is with the 2, I can move 1 there to get $2, which again, we need 10 for that. And it would move the brown further up, which would free up a little bit over here. Because as Ufe says, I'm sorry, yeah, you can't save all of the escaped slaves, and through the middle is always tough road. Flanks are the safest, but they're the longest. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a few for the greater good. Exactly. Am I current? Like, did I do right on the slave catcher movement? Did I miss one? If so, let me know. Or we could spend $2 and be able to buy one of those and then be able to get the fun. I think the movement is the most important right now. Is it? Because I don't want necessarily these guys to leave because I have the Northern Fundraiser, which is $1 per northern city per slave, escaped slave up there. And I need the money. I think moving them up to the north. You know what? Now that yeah, we're going to actually do the movement as the 2 and the 1. So here we go. I think we're going to, because Ripley's actually already in the north. So we're going to go 1 there. Blue moves, and I get $1. Ripley is already in the north. But it would draw purple over. Oh, you know what? Purple should have moved there also for this. I think I've been missing that. I apologize if I have. You know what? I think we will do that there and get $1, and that moves back 1. So there we go. Okay. So we are done now with the action phase. We have done everything that we can do. Get there. Here we go. Starting with the lead player, use the roll, 2 tokens, abolitionist card, done. So slave market, here we go. So 3 come here. 1, 1, and there's 1 left over. So we have our first lost slave. We'll go up there. Moment of silence for that. All right, lantern phase. That card goes away, and that is from the second deck. That will go there. These will slide over. All right, here we go. All right, so we have Cooper Union Speech. This is way hard to freehand. I apologize. There we go. That's pretty close. All right. So this says, move 3 slaves 1 space each or purchase a token at full cost. One of Lincoln's longest speeches. It helped secure his nomination for the presidency and more fully laid out his views against slavery. All right. And the next card is Harriet Beecher Stowe. I'm actually really glad her card came out just from a thematic standpoint. I think that's pretty cool. Wow. Purchase a token into $5 discount. That's not going to suck, not going to lie. It is claimed that when Lincoln met Stowe shortly after the start of the Civil War, he said, "So this is the little lady who made this big war." So there you go. I don't know how true that is, but all right. All right, we are back to the slave catcher phase. We need a lot of not movement, so a non-movement would be great. Here we go. Nope. Orange moving 3 along the black line. That's not good. Orange, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. Does not capture that escaped slave because remember, it's only where they move, where they end. So, okay. Frees up the middle a little bit. So maybe that wasn't the end of the world. Okay. Planning phase, take up the 2 tokens. We have $8. $8 is those 2 or some mix. Or we fundraise. The fundraising is 1, 2, 3, $4 right now. Honestly, getting this guy up here gets us $2. Ooh, this is... With this only being 4, and that being 6, that's 10, that's 11. It is not good, I understand, but I feel like we potentially could win this in 2 rounds. Potentially. So, at the end of this round, all the slave catchers are moving back to their home cities. So orange is going to go there. Blue is going to go there. Yellow is going to go there. Brown's going to go there. And purple is going to come all the way back here. And then we make a big escape the next round. Maybe? Yeah. So, you know what? Give me a minute. I'm going to do something here. I'm a visual person, and this is going to help. So this version of the game, I don't know if this was a Kickstarter version or what. It's been eons. So just as a reminder, so the purple is going to go there. So I'm just going to use these as to let us know where they're going to go. Okay? So blue is going to go there. Brown is going to go there. Yellow is going to go there. And orange is going to go there. Okay? So getting some of the 2 movement ones looks kind of good. So if we were to get this for $4, we could move this 1, 2, which draws orange up. Then what do we do? Boy. Then we could potentially, essentially sacrifice this one to move 2, which would get us $2. That would be 2 of them. And then we take the fundraising, right, as well as an option. Do we go 1, 2 and sacrifice that one for the $2? Because then we would have enough money to be able to buy the support token next round. And then it's just a matter of getting 3 more free. Oh, good point. Yeah, I forgot. It also brings yellow down. Good call. Shoot. Okay, well, another option is we can move this one 1, 2 to get it up into the north to get $1. That brings blue over, which then frees, that would bring blue over 1. Wow. Then we could go 1, 2. It would capture this one, but it would bring that back. That one's a lost cause anyways. And that would bring blue over again. Then we could go 1, 2 to be able to bring that up there. I kind of like that. You know what? I'm not going to overthink it. Let's try it. So I owe $4. I get 2 back. So do that. So here we go. And I need to pay $1 to be able to move this. 1, 2, which will get us $2 for Boston, but unfortunately, as terrible as that is, there. That's 1 of the 3. Back up. Back up. We should have, we had, what, $6? No, we had 8 to begin with. I paid 4, so I should have $4 left before I did that. All right, let's do this before we actually do that. There and there. So we will get $1, and I can get 2. That'll be 1, which moves this onto yellow. And will get me $1. So we're at 6. So that's 1 of the 2. And then I will go there, which will move that there. And that will get us another $1. So we're up to 7. So that is those. Now we have the 3 and the 2. That will go back out here. So now I will pay $1 to move this 1, 2, which will then get us $2. And that'll move brown up here. And it saved a life that way. So that's one of the three. We have two left. Oh, and you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Should have also purchased that. Then we move into the action phase. Sorry, guys. I've already used my rolls. Now I can play 2 tokens. So I now have 2 movement left for 2 tokens each. Or 2, you know what I mean. So I have 2 left. Wondering if I move this one, 1, 2, gets us a buck. It doesn't really help a whole lot, I guess. Would get us $3 if I were to then move Ripley up to Cleveland. It would pull yellow back to where it is right now, and I'm just primed to be able to move around. But I really would like to be able to get some of these out, but I can't, I don't think. Because that slave catcher's there, I cannot move up that way. I suppose we could go 1, 2, and that would pull the purple over temporarily before it goes over there. That might not be a bad option. And in fact, 1, 2, I like that idea. Gets us no money, but I'm okay with that. So we have 1 left. The other question now is, but this is the last movement we have, right? I mean, we could save a life and just stop it right there, but I just don't know. This sounds terrible, but I don't know if it's worth it. Maybe move on to the boat. It helps us in the short term and sets up for the late term. I like that idea. Let's pay a buck, and we have 1 more. That'll go 1, 2, done. So now we can fundraise. So we're fundraising, and the last fundraise action is going to get us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I do not believe the ship counts. Maybe it does. I don't think it does. So we're going to call it 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because Ripley is up north. Check that, $6. Appreciate that, Ian. Thanks, man. All right. All right. So we've used our rolls, played tokens, and we can buy an abolitionist card. Right. Didn't even look at that. We have a lot of money right now. Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I totally forgot about this, so hold on. So Henry Box Brown, it saves a life and puts one into Northern City with no effect. Good, but not great. Cannot buy the U.S. Marshal card. Then Contraband is tempting because this would move up to 3 slaves in small southern spaces to small northern spaces up to 2 spaces away with no effect. So that would get us an extra $3 as well. Or we could do the Cooper Union speech, which would get us a movement of 3 and 1. Also tempting for $2. Wow, okay. Three and 1, huh? So that'd be 1, 2, 3. Wow, huh? Yeah, I think we spend the $2. We will purchase the Cooper Union speech. Move 3 escaped slaves, 1 space. 1, nothing moves. 2, yellow moves. We could move that up to get an extra buck. We could free one of them. Wow. Because that's going to be close between 2 of them. You know what? Three. There we go. All right, so that is the action phase. Now we go into the slave market phase. All right. So we saved a lot of lives that round. Not gonna lie, we really did. So we have to deliver slaves to the plantation. So 3 of these now will go 1, 2, 3. Unfortunately, it's terrible. This is essentially the end of the 5th round. And that is all the slave market cards. Okay. And now we trigger and discard the last 2. So Henry Box Brown goes away. The all slave catchers immediately return to their starting cities. This is now triggered right now. So blue will go there. Orange will go there. I would argue that was actually a beneficial event. There, and brown is there, and yellow goes there. Okay. These will slide down. All right. Here we go. I'm stressed depending on what cards come out. So here we go. Oh, all right. New Jersey abolishes slavery. Slaves may not be moved into or out of northern blue cities using conductor tokens. Huh. In effect until it's removed from the game. Wow, that's unfortunate. It says New Jersey was the last of the northern states to abolish slavery throughout the, I'm sorry, though some remained apprentices until the 13th Amendment, quote unquote apprentices. Yuck. All right, next one. We have Southern secession. And it says, you may return any conductor tokens you used back to the token board. These can be purchased again. And it says, those who sided with this secessionists, argued that the Constitution was an agreement that could be left at any time. All right, you say so. And the final one is Harriet Tubman. And this says, move 2 slaves from any plantation in the South directly to Canada. And the card says, during the war, Tubman led an armed assault on plantations in the South, gaining supplies and freeing hundreds of slaves. All right. So, remember here that the game, even if I get this and 5, it's still, I have to survive through the end of the round. Okay, so the slave market will happen the whole 9 yards. So keep that in mind, all right? So we start with a new round. Roll the slave catcher and movement dice. Here we go. Yellow's moving 3 on the black. 1, 2, 3. Not so bad. Not so bad. And again, does not capture that slave, so awesome. Next is take up the 2 tokens. Well, the obvious one is going to be the final support token. That is one of the 3. Check. Got it. The second one leaves us $1. Unfortunately, we cannot purchase any others. So we're done with the planning phase. So we move into the action phase. So I have my roll. I can play my token and buy abolitionist cards. Okay. So first and foremost, we're definitely going to take the buck to do that. Now, the card over here, remember, says that New Jersey abolishes slavery. It says that slaves may not be moved into or out of blue cities, northern cities, using conductor tokens. Well, I don't have any conductor tokens. But what I do have is I have this allows me to move 1 slave on 1 space. I think I cheated previously. That sucks if I did. So that would allow me to get, say, that out. But then I can buy cards. I have $2. So ooh, hold on. If I did contrabands, moves 3 slaves in small southern spaces that is not nearly as good. That was a really unfortunate timing on that. I think that actually makes sense. So if I were to have bought Harriet Beecher Stowe to use that would have saved me $4. I guess that makes more sense. So I would have done that, which bought me the Harriet Beecher Stowe card, which then I can use to purchase that, which means I would have purchased one of those in lieu of that. But I still cannot move into or out of northern cities. Thanks, Bradley. So I think I do this for my free action on my roll. Then which of these would I have purchased? And I had plenty of money, so literally it's up to me. I cannot move to Canada. I can move within the South, I can move within the North, but I cannot cross the Mason-Dixon, nor can I go into Canada. No, remember, I can only move one. See, only says one. So I think I may have cheated on a previous turn. So what token would we have used? I mean, I assume I would have paid $4. The question is, do I do the 5 and the 1 or the 3 and the 2? Which one, Bernardo? I actually want to check one thing in the rules real quick. Wait a minute. No. All right. Oh, what do we do? What do we do? Oh, this is really unfortunate. I would argue this is a... I don't know if I can move from this into a northern city. I think I'm going to do the 5 and 1. So, and then going to immediately use the 5 and 1. So I'm going to go 1, which goes there and there. 2, and I'm putting those down below. 3 and gives us a buck. And that moves there. Let's back that up. So we're at 2. 3, which will give us $2. That's lost. There's nothing I can do. That's 3. I'm sorry. That's 4. I think the two that make the most sense are moving this up here or moving this up here. And this 5 there and gets us a buck. There we go. Thank you. All right. No, just northern cities. Correct? I mean, am I being obtuse about this? Blue northern cities. So are those literally just these? Because if so, then... Oh, it is. I'm an idiot. All right, a moment. 1. 2. What the hell else did I do? I think something caused that to move. There. 3, 4, which puts that back and puts that back. That's 4. What the hell was the 5th move? I think it was that. So there's my 5. So if that's the case, not 5, 3. Ah! We would have purchased this one and just got them up into Canada. There. And that would go there. They all should be at their starting cities, right? Because that's where they were. There, except for yellow would move up 3. That's it. Which was 1, 2, and 3. There we go. All right, there we go. Cities. All right. Well, if that's the... yeah. So that's how it would have been. Call it good. The slave market. Unfortunately, all 6 of these are lost. There. There. And the game ends. And we actually succeed. I feel like I cheated on a couple of those spots. Accidentally. But there it is. So that's it. All right. Yeah, it's probably an asterisk. You know what that means? I got to play it again. So be it. You know? Yeah, I'm okay with that. There you go. So I was going to tell a story that, I don't know, I might as well. So constantly learning about the effects that racism and slavery and all that has had on us as people in the country and the whole 9 yards. And it's an ever-learning process. Like, I'm learning about things about the history that I didn't know, whether it's playing this or just reading or whatever, a podcast, whatever it is. And so it's constantly a learning process of how racism and slavery and how horrible these things are and how they've affected people. So it's an ever learning process, right? There was a moment in my life. I was in my early 20s. So I was in the Marine Corps, and a friend of mine is from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And we got a 96, which is a 4-day vacation or 4-day weekend. And we made the drive from Beaufort, South Carolina into Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And there was a town, I have no idea what town it was. It wasn't Hattiesburg, it was somewhere else. That we drove through that. This is mid to late 90s, this was. All right, so I'm in my 20s. Yeah, so mid to late 90s, somewhere in 95 to 99, somewhere in that window. We drove through a town in Mississippi, rural, very rural Mississippi. For those that are unfamiliar, Mississippi is right here, okay? So we drove from Beaufort, South Carolina, which is right here, to Hattiesburg, which is somewhere in that area, I think. So we're driving over there. And the most shell-shocked I've ever been in my life, I think. We drove to the edge of this town, and we're about to go in, and we just happened to be, you know how, like, city of whatever it is. There was a handwritten sign, you know, not a legal sign or whatever. It said, "Nigger, don't let the sun set on you." And I was like, are you kidding me? And I'm from Oregon originally, and it's, yeah, no, wow. I just looked at Jay, and I was like, what? And so that was an eye-opening experience, that in the late 90s still existed. No idea. Had no frame of reference on that whatsoever. I was stunned. So yeah, it's an ever-learning process, and I think we all do our part to eliminate from our own lives where we see it, or if we see any of it even subtly in our own lives. We try and do our part with that. But yeah, thinking back on that, I can still remember just the utter disbelief I had when I saw that. Yeah, wow. History dies hard, I guess, in some things, which is terrible in this regard. I wish this would die a quick death. But unfortunately, it's been going on for hundreds of years, and it still exists, which is unfortunate. So whether it's here in the U.S. or anywhere in the world, it still exists. And yeah, anything we can do to get rid of the racism that bore this to begin with would be, we'd all benefit from that. And so, not to leave things on a downer, I want to try and think about the positives. So I haven't been as active on social media or whatever recently, but last night when I was setting up the game and everything, it was 1, 2 in the morning or whatever after I get done with the stream last night with Andrew, and I was on YouTube, and I was looking at just looking for something to listen to, and there are various artists being musicians. The one that actually got me onto this was the Lumineers, lead singer of the Lumineers. They're like these bands, or in some cases, most of the time, it's like solo artists or lead singer of a band. They're live streaming on Instagram and stuff, and just interacting with the people, with fans. And I thought that we're kind of all in this fight together. We're all in this same boat right now of being quarantined and having to fight something that doesn't care if you're white, you're black, you're brown, your nationality, your religion, your sexual preference. Doesn't matter. It'll kill you. It doesn't matter. So it was kind of, there was a humanity in that I saw last night. Saw Chris Martin from Coldplay. He did one. Chrissy Teigen and John Legend did one. And a bunch of different artists have done this. And the lead singer of Bastille was there. Like, it was just cool to see. I was unaware that this was going on. So I played a whole lot of catch up on a bunch of these. The one that was a little bit more close to home, Lumineers, is one of my favorite bands. But the day I got back from Gamma Trade Show, I was supposed to go to the Dropkick Murphys concert at Encore at the casino here. And that got canceled. And for anybody that knows, Dropkick Murphys are really synonymous with Boston. And they are Boston through and through. They are very Irish-American, right? They are very Bostonian. And every year they do a concert for St. Paddy's Day. And obviously couldn't do that given what was going on. So they just live streamed their concert for 2 hours on like an empty stage with no fans. And that was just, there's a humanity in that, I guess, is what I'm getting to. That was just when I'm setting up a game like this and I'm watching that, it reminds me that, and I remember my memory. So like I see the extremes of things, and it's just reminds me there's a lot of good in the world, and to not lose sight of our history, as ugly and as nasty as it may be. Regardless of where you're from, you have dark history of where you're from, I'm sure. And so, yeah, just remember it. That way we try not to repeat it and try and fight it back on the negative side of things as best we can. And yeah, try and look at the good in the world and try and be good, I guess is what I'm saying. Anyway, that was a hell of a long, weird tangent. Sorry about that. There we go. So, all right, that was heavy. Let's go into something lighter, shall we? So tomorrow, Field Commander Napoleon at 3 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully you guys join me for that. Yeah, sorry I messed up there at the end a little bit on rewinding things, so I'm sure I'll hear about it in the comments below. But you know what? I had a good time. It wasn't fun. Let me be clear. I don't know that this game is ever fun, but this game it's good, and it's a good experience even if it's not fun. You know what I mean? So thanks everybody for hanging out. Be nice to one another. Remember to social distance, do your part. And I will see you guys tomorrow at 3 p.m. for Field Commander Napoleon. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Support the show, pledgehc.com. I would appreciate that. I'm Edward. I will see you guys in about just over 24 hours. All right? You guys have a wonderful rest of your Friday? Yeah, it's Friday. All right. Take care, everybody.